The throne room of Horus stretched for miles beneath a ceiling of black crystal. The Dragon King sat on his throne made of fused metal and bone, his enormous body filling the space with a presence that made the air heavy. His scales were deep red, almost black, and they caught the light of the 1,000 burning torches that lined the walls. His wings folded against his back, each scale as large as a human body. Before him stood the council, 7 beings of different species, each one powerful in their own way, but all of them smaller than their king. They stood in their places and waited for him to speak. Horus had ruled the sovereign domain for 300 years. In that time, he had conquered 43 worlds. He had brought order through strength. The council knew this. Everyone in the sovereign domain knew this. Today, they had come to report on the new acquisition. A human colony ship had fallen from the sky onto one of the mining worlds. The ship was broken. The humans inside were scattered across the planet. The council wanted to know what to do with them. The first council member was named. He was of a species with 4 arms and skin like metal. He stepped forward and bowed low. "My king, the humans are weak. They are broken from the crash. We can put them in the labor camps and use them for the deep mines. They may live for 10 years if we work them hard. They are worth nothing else." The others nodded. This was the way of the sovereign domain. New species were resources. They worked until they died, and then new workers replaced them. It had been like this for centuries. Horus listened without moving. His eyes were yellow and cold like fire. He did not speak. This was his way. He made others wait for his words. It made his words feel heavier when they came. A second council member, a female called Ra, also stepped forward. "The ship carried medical supplies and food rations. We can use these. The humans themselves are weak but useful. Their hands are small and good for the detailed work in the deep tunnels. I agree with, labor camp is best." The others spoke too. One after another, they said the same thing. The humans were weak. The humans were useful only for work. The humans would die and then they would be replaced. It was normal. It was how things worked in the sovereign domain. Then Horus heard it. It was a sound so small that most beings in the room did not notice it at all. But the Dragon King heard everything that happened in his domain. He had sensors and eyes everywhere. The sound came from the quarantine sector, far below the throne room where the humans were being held. It was a cry. Not the cry of pain that comes from an accident, not the sound of fear before death. It was something different. It was the sound of loss. It was the sound of something small and alone calling out for something that was not there. Horus raised his head. His yellow eyes grew bright. The council stopped talking. They could see that something had changed. The Dragon King was listening to something they could not hear. "Silence," Horus said. His voice was low and filled the whole room like thunder. The council stepped back. They waited. The Dragon King closed his eyes. The cry came again. It was the voice of a child, a human child. The sound was calling for a mother. The sound was desperate and lost and alone. Horus had heard many sounds in his 300 years. He had heard the screams of soldiers in battle. He had heard the cries of workers dying in the mines. He had heard the sound of species begging for mercy. All of these sounds were expected. They were part of the way the world worked. But this sound was different. This sound made something move inside him, something that had never moved before. The Dragon King opened his eyes. "Bring me the sensors from the quarantine sector, now." And the others moved quickly. They did not question the king. A young assistant brought a display screen and activated it. The screen showed the holding cells where the humans were kept. Most of them were sitting in silence. Some were injured. Some were looking at the walls with empty eyes. But in one cell, a small shape was moving. A child. A human girl, no more than 8 or 9 years old by human measurement. Her hair was yellow and her face was wet with tears. She was standing in the corner of the cell with her arms raised, calling out for someone who was not there. "Mother," the child called. "Mother, where are you? Father, where are you?" The cry came again and again. Horus watched the screen without moving. The council watched their king. They did not know what he was thinking. The Dragon King did not show his thoughts easily. "What is her designation?" Horus asked. One of the younger council members checked the records. "The human designation is Emma, my king. Age 8 years, human measurement. No parents found in the crash survivors. She was alone in a sealed section of the ship. We do not know why she is the only one from that section." Emma, the word meant nothing. It was just a name. But Horus heard it and something in him changed. Send medical support to the cell, Horus said. Food, water, heat, she is not to be harmed. The council looked at each other with surprise. This was not normal. The king did not give special treatment to workers. The king did not care about individual humans. The king cared about order and strength and the running of the empire. Stepped forward. My king, the protocol for... Protocol is what I say it is, Horus cut him off. His voice was sharp as broken glass. The child will be cared for. She will be protected. If anything happens to her, the person responsible will die slowly. The room went silent. The Dragon King stood from his throne. His body was so large that his head touched the ceiling. His wings opened, each one as wide as a building. The torches flickered in the wind from his movement. I will visit the quarantine sector, Horus said. The council is dismissed. The council members bowed and left the room quickly. They did not understand what was happening, but they knew that something had changed in their king, and they were afraid. Horus descended from his throne and began to walk toward the lower sections of the palace. Behind him, the great doors closed with a sound like thunder. The Dragon King was going to meet the human child. He did not know why. He did not understand what he was feeling. The quarantine sector was cold and gray. The walls were made of reinforced metal and there were no windows. The cells were small. Each cell held 5 to 10 humans lying on the floor with little light and less hope. The sector smelled of fear and sickness and despair. Horus walked through the halls. His body was too large for the corridors. His wings scraped against the walls, leaving deep marks in the metal. The guards who worked in this sector saw him and moved out of his way quickly. They had never seen the Dragon King down here before. No king had ever come to the quarantine sector. There was no reason for a king to come here. The humans were not important enough. Horus found Emma's cell. The medical staff had already brought her what he ordered. There was food on a tray. There was water in a container. There was a blanket. Emma was sitting on the floor, wrapped in the blanket, looking at nothing. When she saw the Dragon King enter the room, she did not scream. She did not run. She simply looked at him with eyes that were empty and lost. Horus had to bend his head to fit in the cell. His size made the small room feel even smaller. He looked at the child for a long time without speaking. Emma stared back at him. "What is your name?" Horus asked. His voice was softer than before, but still heavy and deep. Emma, the girl said quietly, "I am Emma. I am Horus, I am the Dragon King. I rule this domain." Emma did not react to this information. It meant nothing to her. She was too young to understand power. She only understood that she was alone and her parents were gone. "Are you hurt?" Horus asked. "No," Emma said, "but I cannot find my mother and father. I have been calling for them. They do not answer. Will you help me find them?" Horus felt something pull inside his chest. It was a feeling he had not experienced before. He did not have a word for it, but it was there, real and strong, making it hard for him to speak. "I will help you," Horus said, "but first you must eat. You must be strong." Emma looked at the food. She was hungry. She had not eaten since the crash. She began to eat the food slowly. Horus watched her. He sat on the floor because there was no other place for him to sit. His body was too large, but he stayed in the cell with her while she ate. "I am looking for Robert and Lisa," Emma said between bites of food. "They are my parents. My father is strong. My mother has soft hands. They will be here somewhere. They will be looking for me too." Horus left the cell and used his authority to search the records. He had every file from the crash brought to him. He went through them himself, looking at the names and the fates of all the humans who had been on the ship. It took him 2 hours to find the truth. Robert and Lisa were listed in the death records. They had been found in the crash wreckage in a sealed section of the ship. They had died protecting the emergency pod where Emma was hiding. They had used their bodies to shield her from the impact. By the time the rescue teams found them, they were already gone. Emma was alone. She was the only member of her family who had survived. Horus returned to the cell. Emma was sleeping under the blanket. He did not wake her. He sat beside her and stayed there through the night. When Emma woke, she asked again about her parents. Horus told her the truth. It was the kind way, he thought, better than lying to her. Emma cried, she cried, and Horus stayed with her. He did not know what to do. He was not made for this kind of pain, but he stayed anyway. Over the next several days, Horus visited Emma many times. He brought her food. He brought her books that humans could read. He sat with her and listened to her talk about her mother and father. She told him stories about times they had spent together. She told him about her father's strength and her mother's kindness. She told him about love and family and sacrifice. The council was watching. They saw their king spending time with a human child. They saw HFY moved into the palace chambers that were prepared for her. She had a room with light coming through windows made of clear crystal. She could see the landscape below, the mountains and the mining operations stretching across the planet. She had food whenever she wanted it. She had clothes and books and all the things that a child should have. But she never forgot her parents, and she never forgot the millions of humans and other beings who were still in the labor camps. 3 months after Emma came to live in the palace, strange things began to happen in the sovereign domain. In the deep mines where humans worked, productivity began to drop. Workers moved slower. They made mistakes. They refused dangerous tasks. The supervisors reported that the humans were harder to control than before. At the same time, other species in the labor camps began to act differently too. A species that had been enslaved for 200 years asked for better food. The creatures that had never spoken in all their years of slavery began to whisper to each other about freedom. The guards could not explain what was happening. But the truth was simple. Word had spread that the Dragon King had shown mercy. If he could protect one human child, perhaps he could be made to protect others. Perhaps the king was not the unfeeling machine that everyone believed him to be. Perhaps the sovereign domain could change. The council saw the danger immediately, called for martial law. He demanded that Horus crush the unrest with force. He demanded that the king make an example of the rebellious workers. He demanded that things return to normal. But Horus did not listen. He spent his time with Emma instead. She told him stories about human families. She told him about human love and human sacrifice. She told him about her father who had died to protect her. She told him about her mother who had given everything for her child's survival. These stories changed Horus. They showed him a way of living that he had never seen before. In the sovereign domain, strength meant power over others. Strength meant control and domination. But in Emma's stories, strength meant protection. It meant sacrifice. It meant putting others before yourself. In the labor camps, a human named David was planning something more serious than slow work and quiet resistance. David had been a military officer before the crash. He was intelligent and strong and angry. He had lost his entire unit in the crash. He had watched humans die in the mines every day since then. He was done being patient. David sent a message to Emma through the smuggling network that existed in the palace. The message was simple: we are going to fight for freedom. We are going to take this world for ourselves. Will you help us? Emma received the message and felt torn. She had gratitude for Horus. He had saved her life. He had shown her kindness when everything else was darkness. But she also had responsibility to her people. Thousands of humans were suffering. Millions of beings across the sovereign domain were enslaved and dying. She went to Horus and told him the truth. She told him that David and the others were planning a rebellion. She told him that her people were fighting for freedom. She told him that she understood if he had to stop them, but she wanted him to understand why they were fighting. Horus listened to every word. And for the first time in his long life, the Dragon King faced a choice that had no simple answer. The council demanded war. They demanded that he mobilize the fleet and crush the rebellion before it could. The rebellion started in the deep mines of the southern continent. David led the first strike against the main processing facility. He did not have weapons as advanced as the sovereign domain's forces. He had tools and fire and human determination. He had something else too. He had people who believed that life could be different. The first attack was a success. David and his fighters disabled the processing facility. The facility would take months to repair. Production on the planet dropped by 30% in a single day. The council demanded immediate response. They demanded that Horus send the military forces to crush the rebellion. They told him that hesitation would lead to the collapse of the entire system. They told him that the humans had to be destroyed to send a message to all the other enslaved species that resistance was impossible. But Horus did not send the forces immediately. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone. He went to David himself alone, carrying no weapons. David was in a hidden camp in the mountains when the Dragon King landed. His soldiers prepared to fight, but Horus held up his claws and showed that he was unarmed. "I am here to listen," Horus said. "You are fighting for freedom, tell me why." David stood facing the most powerful being in the sovereign domain. He could have tried to fight. He could have tried to run, but he decided to speak the truth. "We are fighting because we do not want to die in your mines. David said. "We are fighting because our children should not be born as slaves. We are fighting because life should mean more than work until death. We are fighting because we are human, and humans deserve to live free." Horus listened. He understood these words. Emma had taught him to understand them. The rebellion continued. More humans joined David. Workers from the other enslaved species began their own uprisings. The sovereign domain was fracturing from the inside. The council called emergency meetings. They demanded that the king act. Finally, Horus called for war. He mobilized the fleet. He sent warships to the southern continent. The military forces were ordered to crush the rebellion. The war was short and brutal. The humans had no advanced weapons. They could not match the technology of the sovereign domain. Thousands died. The rebellion was pushed back into the mountains. It seemed like the uprising would be defeated. But then something unexpected happened. As the military forces were moving in for the final strike, Horus gave a new order. He ordered the forces to stand down. He ordered them to stop the attack and return to their bases. The order was received in shock. The commanders asked for clarification. The council members in the war room questioned what they were hearing, but the order was clear. The Dragon King was ending the military operation. The news spread through the galaxy in minutes. The Dragon King, the ruler of the sovereign domain for 300 years, had sided with the rebels against his own council. He had chosen to stop the war instead of crush the rebellion. No one could believe it. The most powerful empire in this part of the galaxy was changing because of one man's choice. One Dragon King had decided that the old way was not the right way anymore. The council demanded an explanation, came to Horus with rage in his eyes. "You have destroyed everything we built. You have ended the empire. How could you do this?" Horus looked at his council member and felt something like sadness. "I have saved the empire," he said quietly. "I saved it from becoming something that was not worth saving anymore. 300 years of power built on nothing but fear and suffering. That was not strength. That was sickness." The council was dismissed. Most of them disappeared that night. Some fled to other parts of the galaxy. Was executed by the Dragon King himself, not in anger but in justice. Emma came to Horus and asked him if he regretted his choice. She expected him to say yes. She expected him to be angry at her for helping the rebellion, for changing his mind. But Horus told her the truth. "I regret the years before I heard you cry in that cell. I regret all the suffering that happened in my domain. I regret that I was too blind to see the wrongness until a small child showed me the way. 1 year had passed since the war ended. The sovereign domain was no longer a place of slavery and fear. The Council of Seven was gone, replaced by a council of many different species, each one with a voice and a vote. The labor camps were closed. The mines were reopened, but the workers were now paid for their labor. They had the choice to leave if they wanted to. Some did. Some stayed because the mines were now better places to work. The sovereign domain had money and resources. The new leaders decided to use them to improve the lives of the people. David had become an advisor to Horus. The Dragon King and the human military officer worked together to build a new system of government. It was not perfect. Change was difficult. Many people on both sides resisted what was happening, but slowly something new was being created. Emma was older now. She was no longer a child broken by loss. She had grown into a young woman with strength and intelligence. She worked with Horus every day, helping him understand human needs and human dreams. She was a bridge between the humans and the Dragon King. She was proof that two very different species could understand each other and work together. The new government was called the Coalition of Equals. Any species could join it. Any being could have a voice in the decisions that affected their world. It was a revolutionary idea in a galaxy that had known only conquest and domination. Other parts of the sovereign domain were watching. Other worlds began to ask questions. Could they also join the coalition? Could they also be free? The change was spreading like a wave across the empire. A year after the war, the first peace accords were being signed. Representatives from dozens of species were arriving at the new capital city. They came to see if the Coalition of Equals was real or just words. They came to see if a Dragon King and a human child could really have changed an empire. Emma and Horus stood on the observation deck high above the capital city. Below them, ships were landing. Ships of different designs from different species, all arriving at the same place. All arriving to meet as equals. "Do you regret it?" Emma asked him. "Do you regret giving up everything you had?" Horace looked down at the city. He thought about the 300 years he had spent ruling through fear. He thought about the countless beings who had suffered under his power. He thought about the emptiness of all that conquest and control. "No," he said finally. "I do not regret it. I have lost an empire of fear and suffering, but I have gained something much more valuable. I have gained the respect and trust of millions of beings. I have gained friendship. I have gained the knowledge that strength is not about how many beings you can control. Strength is about how many lives you can improve. You showed me this, Emma. A small human child showed the most powerful being in the galaxy what it really means to be strong." Emma reached up and placed her hand on the Dragon King's scaled arm. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. It meant trust. It meant connection. It meant that two beings from different worlds could care about each other. Below them, the representatives arrived in the Great Hall. The new age was beginning. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation was starting. The child who cried in a dark cell had changed the universe, and the Dragon King who heard her cry had learned what his power was truly for. Spread, they told him that showing mercy to one child had opened a door to chaos. They told him that the whole empire was at risk. Horace looked at Emma sitting in his chamber. She was small and fragile and young. She was a human. She was supposed to be nothing in the eyes of the sovereign domain, but she had changed everything. "I am breaking the rules of the sovereign domain." They saw weakness entering their leader like a disease. Came to the throne room and demanded answers. "My king, why do you spend time with a single human? This is not the way. This is against the protocol. The council questions your judgment." Horace looked at the council member with fire in his eyes. "I do not care what the council questions. The girl is under my protection. If anything happens to her, if she is harmed or moved or treated poorly, that person will be executed. This is my word." The council members looked at each other. Something fundamental had changed in their king, and they did not understand it, but they began to fear it. That night, Horace made a decision. He declared Emma a ward of the king. She would not be in the labor camps. She would not work in the mines. She would live in the palace in rooms close to his own. She would be treated with respect. The news spread through the quarantine sector and beyond. The humans began to talk. The Dragon King, the most powerful being in the sovereign domain, had shown mercy. He had protected a child. He had broken the rules. For the first time in the long history of the sovereign domain, the enslaved species began to believe that change might be possible. But he knew that the small cry from the quarantine sector had reached something inside him that nothing else had ever touched, and he needed to see what made that sound.